Hi, my friends. So it's Matt Christopher, and I just thought I'd jump online and sort of do a roundup for the year. So we're here in Australia. We're facing or heading into the new year. So tonight's going to have more than fireworks, but I think a lot of reflection too of the year that's gone by. So may I just say first of all, thank you very much to the thousands of you that have supported me. Yes, the last video that I did some time ago, there was 12,000 of you that tuned in. I'm very grateful for your love and support. It's often difficult for me to find the time to produce these videos, but I hope that the videos that I do produce are of some benefit to you. So 2023 in terms of Jehovah's Witnesses, well, a huge amount has happened on the legal front, and also doctrinal changes that have occurred. Now, many have done great justice to the changes that that have occurred. One being the changes to the no beard policy for appointed men within the congregation. That was a long-standing policy of approximately, well, over 40 years at least. And many have done incredible videos, other activists have done incredible videos explaining the complete overreach of the governing body in their policies in that regard. What's interesting is that one of the members of the governing body that announced it, I said in my last video I wasn't, as a rule, going to mention these insidious men's names anymore. I don't want to give them any more fame or notoriety than they deserve, which is a big fat zero. But the member of the governing body who announced this let the cat out of the bag when he said, let's have a look at, in a sense, the journey of beards in society. And they did this little video presentation about beards in history and going in fashion and coming out of fashion and back and forth. Now, at absolutely no time did they mention what the Bible had to say or didn't have to say on the issue of beards. Now, what was really interesting is they spoke about how those in the first century and so forth, how they chose to have beards. Now, the fact of the matter is that if you read the Bible, the Old Testament made it very clear that men of Israel, the Jews, were not allowed to be clean shaven. Okay, they were not allowed to trim the extremities, I should say, of their beard. So that was a hard prohibition. Now, when Christianity then came to the fore, those Judaic rules passed. Okay, and then the Christian era approached, and that was one of freedom from the law, and Christians were under the law of love and to follow Jesus Christ. And to have such slavish rules is not part of the Christian doctrine. Now, the point was that this member of the governing body just falsified why Jehovah's Witnesses refused to have beards. Now, growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, it was always, I must say, it was always a hot button issue, because many people are willing to, even in a high control group as Jehovah's Witnesses, are willing to give up many things, but when it comes to the essential aspect of their personal being, such as whether or not you're allowed to have a beard or a moustache, these things touch at a nerve. Now, what did Jehovah's Witnesses say at the time? And that was that they claimed, and others have pointed this out. I know that Jeff Mesra from the Watchtower History channel has shown through many of the Watchtower's publications that Jehovah's Witnesses went to the extent of saying that Jesus didn't even have a beard. So they started off with this false notion that Jesus didn't have a beard, so it was wrong, and off it went, that it was something that was akin to being unclean, and we're talking moral cleanliness. Now, the issue was that this generated huge arguments within the congregation. It was indefensible. I remember once I spoke to a circuit overseer who actually was staying at our home, and I discussed that issue with him, going through the scriptures with him to show him that it was impossible, absolutely impossible, to show that God had a prohibition on actually wearing a beard. And of course his answer was that is the way that Jehovah had directed the organisation. So this policy of beards was laid at the feet of Jehovah, and in a lesser extent Jesus Christ. So the fact of the matter is, it was never posed as one that was keeping up with the fashions of the day. Quite different. The ludicrous examples that they gave, and this member of the governing body in the video also pointed that there was, especially during the 1960s and the 1970s, which was the hippie movement, and those, I suppose, student activists, to put it that way, because they had beards, that meant that you would be associated with radical student movements, or almost like anarchists. And never mind that at the same time there were statesmen and other men of great repute in the community that had beards. That wasn't the case. In actual fact, I remember very clearly that the Jehovah's Witnesses would say that people that had beards, that they were arrogant and they were conceited and they weren't showing a humble attitude. So it was character assassination, not just of the young people at the universities in the United States, for instance, who were protesting against a crooked and broken system, especially the issues surrounding race relations, especially in the United States. No, it was a character assassination of men who had nothing to do with that counter culture, but was to say that they were not humble and they weren't Christian in their attitude. Now, what happened to the poor Jehovah's Witness men that decided to have a beard? Now, while you couldn't be disfellowshipped, the fact is you were viewed as someone that was disobedient, rebellious, and you weren't qualified to take responsibility in the congregation. Now, what's interesting about that is that if someone that is we're talking about Jehovah's Witnesses here, was a baptized Jehovah's Witness, they were going out in their ministry, they were doing all of that, living up to the rules and regulations of their faith, they'd be treated as if they were a drunk or a drug addict, or that they were an immoral person because they grew facial hair. So the fact was that the discipline, the marginalising of people just for growing facial hair was extreme, and it went on for decades and decades. Now, I'll give you an example of the absolute stupidity that happened here in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. There was an elder in one of the neighbouring congregations, and he had a moustache. Yes, it was quite a full moustache, and that was enough for many of the elders to be very upset that he had a moustache. And in my congregation, which was in Carindale Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and then in Carina Congregation, there would be open discussions about this fellow elder and his moustache. That was bad enough because it was a full moustache, to put it that way. Okay, that's the level of animosity that was shown, not just the beard, but for those that even had moustaches. Anyway, this brother, I think he was in Wishart congregation. If anybody in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia knows who I am talking about, actually a really great guy, to be honest. He had this basically this handlebar moustache, to put it that way. And I was listening in on a conversation with two elders, and one of them said, "Did you see that such and such in Wishart congregation, that he's shaved off his moustache? And the reason why he's done this is because finally he is willing to submit to Jehovah's organisation and put aside his own personal freedoms or choices or things like that." And I said to the elder in my congregation, I said, "Are you sure that's the case?" "Oh, yes, absolutely." Now, I used to say I had the worst luck in the world. Now I think it's the best luck. Is very soon after that ridiculous conversation, we had a convention at the Browns Plains Assembly Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses here in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And this particular brother with the moustache like this, and those in Brisbane will know exactly who I'm talking about. I went and saw him. I just saw him in one of the aisles there, because they were in our Wishart was in our cluster of congregations, and I said, "Oh, you've shaved off your mo?" And he said, "Yeah, I wanted the change, and yeah, had it for a long time." I said, "Oh," I said, "did you realise that the elders," and I named them, one of them was starting with a W, he said that the reason why you shaved off your moustache was finally because now you come to your senses and you were following Jehovah's organisation and his standards, and that you were putting aside your own rights to facial hair." And he said, "No, nothing could be further from the truth." And he said, "Well, if that's it, I'm going to grow it back again." Okay, that's the level of insanity that people had to deal with. Okay, now, the simple fact is this, that the reason why the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses changed their mind is because of the exodus of people leaving the organisation. Secondly, that governing body member, he said that the Bethels were sending in questions to them about beards. Now, what had happened, from my understanding, is younger Jehovah's Witnesses were basically not going to follow the rules anymore. Okay, they just weren't going to do it. Okay, there was no basis for this at all. Completely unscriptural, arbitrary decisions that were made by the governing body, and I'll explain why they did it. And so they were in revolt. That was the reason why. Had a choice. What we're going to do is we're going to eliminate, once again, all these young men as possible candidates for elders or ministerial servants because they want to have facial hair. Okay, that's the reason behind it. Okay, now the reason for why they had the beard policy is simply this. When Rutherford, the second president of the Watchtower Society, decided there was going to be a birth of a new nation, and in a thought bubble, unbeknownst to anybody else, decided that he was going to announce that they were changing their name to Jehovah's Witnesses without consulting with anybody, changing from the International Bible Students Association to Jehovah's Witnesses, and this was the birth of a new nation. The fact is this, that advertise the King and the Kingdom, or may I say Watchtower, was the foremost thing. So what it meant was this was about promoting their brand. Okay, it had nothing to do with any biblical standards. Clearly doesn't. Okay, it was about presenting the squeaky clean image, the most squeaky clean image that you possibly could to the unsuspecting public. That's why you had the the holy white shirt. That's why you had the suit and ties. That's why you had the briefcases. And if those can remember from my time back, is that the standard of your briefcase, how clean it was a representation of Jehovah God himself. I mean, what kind of craziness is that? This is just a sales technique. This is to present yourself in the best way. Now, in a business setting, that's fine, but can you force that on people of faith and because they don't comply with these arbitrary man-made rules, to put them into a place of compromise? So they're either not allowed to have a beard, not allowed to have a moustache, in the case that I mentioned, okay, because otherwise they're going to be eternally punished by the organisation. This is just twisted and sick. No basis in scripture whatsoever. None at all. That governing body member gave absolutely no basis for why in scripture they did it. It was just arbitrary. Now the point is this. This is the way that Jehovah's Witnesses are going. They're going to do anything whatsoever to keep the flock in. It certainly, and I was actually having a conversation with some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses recently, Daphne and Steve. So hopefully you'll see this, Daphne and Steve. We were actually talking. This is actually before this announcement was made. And it was after the announcement about the hours not being counted anymore, which was, we've already discussed this, but that was just an absolute clanger, absolute shocker. I mean, at one stage, as I said, that they were claiming that God knew named all the stars in the heavens and knew every hair on your head. So that meant that he was counting stars. So that meant that we needed to be like Jehovah and counting the hours. That's all gone by the by and by. And we speculated about what was going to happen next. We didn't know, but we were guessing what was going to change. And we did speak about beards, and one that we spoke about is about birthdays. It certainly would not surprise me going forward if they turn around and say that birthdays are a conscience issue, because there's no prohibition whatsoever in the Bible about birthdays. If it was a disfellowshipping issue, one thing was for sure, is birthdays were there in the first century, and of course the Romans and the Greeks and the others celebrated them, and it was something that was very well known, everyday occurrence to Christians. And the issue of if it was a disfellowshipping issue, wouldn't it, or being an excommunication issue for Christians, and to lose God's favour, wouldn't it have been mentioned just once that Christians were forbidden from celebrating birthdays? But alas, nothing. So watch this space. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the court cases that have been happening this year. Now, the one that's really taken my eye is the one in Japan, in which they are talking, at least investigating the idea, or the accusations of corporal punishment. And there is harrowing details of former Jehovah's Witnesses who were literally beaten and whipped by their parents for disobeying the rules of the faith. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses have come out and quite comically come out and said that they have never encouraged corporal punishment. Let me repeat that. The organisation, Watchtower Island Tract Society, has said that they have never, I repeat, never encouraged corporal punishment. That is a sick, twisted lie. There is not a Jehovah's Witness that has been raised as one that would be 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 years of age that would not themselves have been given a right royal flogging or being disciplined in a physical way. I don't think there was an event ever that I went to at a Kingdom Hall in which a child wasn't dragged out by one arm while being hit as they're screaming down the aisle. We used to know the born in Jehovah's Witnesses because they always had one arm longer than the other because mum or dad would be yanking you by that one arm, and they'd be taking you, for instance, to the B school, the dreaded B school, and giving you a right royal thrashing. Now, this is the point. People can argue that in the 60s or back 50s, 60s, 70s or so forth, that was the common order of the day. I'm not going to argue that that's the way it was. People got hit with belts and whips and all kinds of things. Okay, wooden spoons, other cooking implements, that was pretty normal. That's not the issue. The issue is that Jehovah's Witnesses are saying that they never encouraged it. It's not that it wasn't common in society, it was, and they were part of it. Now, the point was there was a brother, he's no longer with us. I think it was actually a circuit overseer here in Australia, Neville Bromwich. And Neville Bromwich, in a joke, and it was said as a joke, he was interviewing a witness woman on stage at one of the conventions. They're talking about discipline, and I think she was a single mother, and she said it was important to be disciplining the children. And Neville said, as a joke, and it was said as a joke, but I remember it, he said, so what you're saying, sister, if you've got an overactive child, you need an overactive stick. And we all laughed. Okay. Now, he meant it as a joke. I'm not trying to put, anything negative on Neville Bromwich. He was a very staunch man, but, that was just the prevailing attitude of the day. Secondly, for those of you who are my age, in the 50s and so forth, will remember that the Watchtower went out after a child psychologist, Mr. Spock, not the one from Star Trek, but Mr. Spock. I actually think it was Doctor, actually, but we'll say Mr. Spock. And he was absolutely attacked by Watchtower, because he, as a therapist, as a man of science, said essentially that physical discipline for children could be harmful, and he was against that. And there was so many discourses given about poor Mr. Spock, and it wasn't even after he died. There was this erroneous idea that he recanted from his position and said that the reason why there was delinquency in the world is because he had promoted no corporal punishment. Okay? Now, this was the prevailing idea that was there. I remember I was at a convention and I was an attendant there. I was in Melbourne, and a witness woman brought out her kid into the hallway there. We're in I think it was Batman Avenue. For those in Melbourne that know the convention centre there. And she was wailing into little Johnny, and he's screaming blue murder, and one of the elders sort of walked up to her and said, hey, and I, what's happening here? Why'd you say this? Oh, because there was worldly people that were also there in terms of security and some other staff that were there that had to be there on the premises. And I remember this elder said, we've got to be very careful around these worldly people because they don't like to see children getting hit. Okay? So what is that? The shame. Okay? Now, I cannot even tell you the amount of times that I saw children getting whacked, hit, pinched. I remember I remember it very clearly in the congregation I was in. I remember one mother had her foot on the child's head and holding the child's head down on the ground so it wouldn't get up. Okay, I remember seeing another girl. I was out in the foyer in the congregation that I was in Carindale. I was out in the foyer, happened to be there with the father, and then the daughter, young girl, maybe 8, something like that, came running out of the toilets there, absolutely in a frightful state, and the mother came like she was possessed and just grabbed this girl as hard as could be and yanked her into the toilets, and you could just hear this commotion. And I looked at the father and I'm like, whoa. And he looked down and goes, oh, she's, as in with the mother, oh, she's very hard on her. And then the daughter came up and said, mate, you better do something about this. Come on, mate, this is crazy. Okay. So for Jehovah's Witnesses to turn around and say, you know what, we've never encouraged corporal punishment, what a lie. Now this is what's coming out in Japan. Now, the fact is, at the close of 2023, what we're seeing is all of the chickens coming home to roost for Watchtower. For years, those of us who have spoken out about child abuse and sexual abuse, right, there's a resounding response to that. The authorities know that. The governments know that. It started especially with the ARC, the Royal Commission here in Australia. The UK has had their inquiries. New Zealand is having their inquiries. The US, we know that the state of Pennsylvania has the grand jury, which is looking into perpetrators within Jehovah's Witnesses and so forth. So it is a big thing. It is gained momentum. The second point that I see coming is, of course, the issue pertaining to discipline of children. That's something that is something that I see as being a huge thing, which is part of child abuse. Thirdly, and that is something that will I believe, and I've said this for some time, which will raise its head when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses, is the issue of abuse in terms of marital abuse. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses have said that when it comes to a woman separating, that she could separate from the husband, and then they put in this ridiculous, in a sense, disclaimer: if there is extreme physical abuse. Okay, no, there's no need for you to say extreme physical abuse. It should be just abuse. So who's going to be the arbiter until you get to extreme physical abuse? And God only knows what extreme physical abuse is. The fact is this, that as the end of 2023 comes to an end, so many people are waking up. There's people all around the world who, even in later years, in their 70s and 80s, have finally got the strength to wake up to this absolute and utter Jesus-hating cult. And that's what they are. They have hidden away the gospel of Christ and turned it onto their organisation. It doesn't matter whether they turn their facilities into their version of Disneyland or turn their studios into Paramount. It doesn't make any difference. They can repackage and rebrand as much as they want. They are tainted goods. And I'm very confident in the year to come, 2024, that more and more brave men and women like yourselves will stand up and speak up about the atrocities. And that's what they are. They're atrocities done in God's name. I just want to say thank you to all the other activists. Mike and Kimmy, you've been absolutely amazing. Please continue, and I love your rage against Watchtower. So Mike and Kimmy, I hope that you keep that up. To all the other activists, a goat-like personality, keep it up. You're amazing. to Berean pickets, thank you for what you do. To all of you, to Rick on the 6 screens, please don't give up or give out. You're doing an amazing job. To all of the new activists that have come along in the last year or two, you're just incredible. Your quality of your productions is amazing. It's certainly far better than someone like me in my lounge room, just with my Samsung phone. Unedited and raw. You're certainly doing a way better job than what I could ever do. But even though I find it very difficult to produce very many videos during the year, as I said, thank you so much to all of you and the 12,000 of you that saw my last video. I can't thank you enough. You're just amazing, and just know that I'm doing this because I genuinely love you, and I want all of you to have peace and to have the best life possible, even if most of it, in some people's cases, has been stolen by Watchtower. I hope that at the end of 2024, if we have the pleasure of speaking and communicating, that the story in terms of the dismantling of Jehovah's Witnesses will actually be far along the road. And there's actually, on a bit of a footnote, I'm waiting on a court case that is pending here in Queensland, and an elder, I know the person, who's accused of horrendous sex crimes. And if I'm fortunate enough, I will actually do a broadcast of some kind from outside of that law court. It's personal to me. So look, I'd like to say thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. I'm Matt Christopher, and please stay safe and Happy New Year. Cheers.